Closure remains a dominant narrative about how to respond in the face of loss, in large part because it's an effective marketing tool. And it's also really appealing to think that closure can be the answer to solve your pain and sense of discomfort right now. This concept of closure also fits with this perfectionistic culture's quest to do things right, to never leave something unfinished, especially if it feels or it is messy, right? In this case, you seek to create an end, right, to pain or loss. It comes as no surprise then that most people then turn to all sorts of things to get closure. And I see this in a lot of the high performers with perfectionism that I work with. Whenever they're going through some sort of grief or some sort of loss, they tend to chase closure. The most common interpretation of closure is a satisfying end to some traumatic event. And that traumatic event really is up to you what you define that to be, whether that is something minor or major. Oftentimes, something that is traumatic is actually simply something that is unfamiliar to you. You're stepping beyond what you know and into something new. And in that process, you might be shedding and releasing and wilting. And from that place, you might be feeling a sense of trauma of leaving something behind when you are growing beyond your current form, your current way of being, your current way of seeing things, right? And that can be traumatic. Closure then is presented as an end stage of grief. And since we all experience grief at some point, it's become kind of accepted that we must all also seek closure so that we can move on, move through, and preferably as quickly as possible. Closure can be identified with justice, peace, healing, acceptance, and forgiveness as easily as it can be applied in conversations about unanswered questions or even revenge. Which is to say, far from the tidy finality that it implies. Closure is very confusing. And because it is confusing, it's really tough for someone with perfectionistic tendencies to deal with. Because what really triggers perfectionism is that you seek to have some sort of control, right? Or you absolutely cannot stand things being out of control. And grief in and of itself is an unraveling. It is chaos. It is something that is out of order, right? So you might find that to be very confusing. So closure is not some natural emotional state that we can simply reach, okay? We can't reach and tick off grief. We can't tick off closure. We can't reach something like that. Rather, it's a constructed concept for how we feel like we should respond to loss. So I encourage you to ask yourself, what kind of beliefs might you have about how you should respond to loss? What shoulds are you imposing onto yourself right now with what you're going through and growing through and what you're releasing right now? When traumatic things happen, things that are chaotic and that are out of your control, as they inevitably do happen, people experience a kind of loss and they grieve over what has been lost, whether a life, relationship, home, an identity, a way of living, a way of being, or some other treasured part of life. One perspective that I want to offer you here is that nothing is ever really lost or gained. It simply is what it is. But for our human selves, for our flesh, right? For our heart, that doesn't seem to be right, because the pain might be so much. It might be super overwhelming and it might feel super chaotic. And the fact that this kind of experience that you're going through right now might not actually be a loss in a spiritual sense, because everything is as it is, that's not to say that you're not meant to meet yourself where you are with whatever you're going through, because you are in this human body and you might feel loss. You might feel that to that extent, and it might feel very real. And so you want to meet yourself right there, right? You know, in wondering what to do after such a blow of, trauma, of grief, of loss, you might then look to others in many cases, and you might also find cultural or spiritual rituals to guide you through your grief. You might turn to other places too. A lot of high performers with perfectionism tend to turn to work, tend to turn to performance, and to excel in some area of life. Others might turn to people pleasing others. Some might turn to new people, right? And all these ways of turning away from your grief to something or someone external can become excessive, right? If you believe that there are proper ways to grieve and that you need closure, you probably have opted in for closure marketing. Expecting yourself to find closure within a particular time frame or after specific rituals does not help your understanding of grief or your experience of grief, because the experience of grief is very different from knowing about it, right? It doesn't help you to reach closure, because closure, again, cannot be reached no matter how much you chase closure, right? It cannot be reached. Loss happens to us all at some point, and might be that it happens several times as well. Very often that's the case too. And so we grieve. Having a loved one die, or facing another type of loss, or having someone simply disappear from our lives, or that might literally choose to leave, or that might make you feel like they're no longer there. It might be that they're there with you, but you feel like they're not there. That is a loss in and of itself too. There's so many different ways that loss can appear. It can be a loss of yourself, loss of someone that you were, loss of something that you thought you would have, or loss of a future that you imagined that you would share with someone dear. And that can lead you on a long and difficult journey to come back to the light, to the sunflower and the bloomer within that was always there and is always there to begin with. You do not need to be alone in this journey, and there is a lot of hope for learning how to integrate a loss into your life. However, what I want to get across here is that no one product, ritual, or conversation will ever be the answer. You might twist and turn in your bed for days, weeks, months, years, wondering what it would be like to get closure, to understand fully and completely what happened and for which reason. But if there's one thing that I've come to learn, it's that closure cannot be done. It cannot be forced. When you push, prove, and please your way to closure, it only moves farther and farther away from your grasp. It's only when you, at some point, put your focus elsewhere, within, that it slowly but surely dissipates. But that's exactly what you're afraid of, isn't it? To choose the light, to choose the sunflower, to choose the bloomer within. That is something that brings up guilt for you, maybe. Right? You might feel guilt for choosing that, for releasing, for letting go, for giving yourself a sense of acceptance for what was, even though that it might not have brought you the sense of closure that you wanted or seeked. So allow yourself to feel whatever you're feeling. Move through it. Grow through it. And until one day, the guilt for choosing the sunflower and the bloomer and the light within you is replaced with openness for what was, with gratitude for what you've learned, and with a sense of freedom to create and contribute and love again. I want to leave you right now with this. Ask yourself, in what way am I chasing closure right now? By seeking out closure, what will I no longer betray about myself? Because here's the thing. Leading up to the kind of trauma, you might have betrayed aspects about yourself. And so ask yourself, what might that be? What are you no longer willing to betray about yourself? Because inevitably, when your heart is breaking, or what I say, breaking open, when you are grieving, letting go, or releasing, that is simply an invitation to be with what is, with what you are, with what you're not, and simply see that there are always potential to learn, to grow. And so that is what this is about. Releasing the need to chase closure, seeing that closure is an illusion in and of itself, and that closure cannot be done. It will inevitably just unpack itself in time. That being said, support is something that is really helpful, especially if you find yourself having perfectionistic tendencies of wanting to control this grief or this period in which you're going through where you're releasing and letting go. If you find extreme discomfort with that and you seek closure, then it might actually help to come into the Bloom Beyond tribe, for instance, and have someone that's coaching you through that to guide you to the only person that can give you a sense of acceptance, right? And that is you. That is the sunflower, the bloomer, the light within you. So as a light worker, as a coach, I'm simply here to mirror you, to ask you powerful questions, to point within you so that you can go within yourself. Because those answers, they will be there. The acceptance will be there. The truth of the matter will be there. The love is there. So I invite you to go to bloombeyond.com/apply to apply to join the Bloom Beyond tribe, to be part of that for a free month. You'll be part of a free monthly cohort. And then from there, you also have the opportunity to proceed into a 1 year, for instance, commitment, a long-term commitment to really bloom beyond perfectionism and allow for this grief, allow for this pain, this whatever you're going through, to be transmuted into an opening of yourself. That is what I'm here for, right? For you to wilt, fall, root, rise, and bloom. So you'll get an opportunity to explore Bloom Beyond Perfectionism and Bloom Beyond Mastermind as alternatives for you to grow from and support you in your journey ahead. I'm sending you so much light and love. Allow the frequencies in my voice to comfort you, to guide you to the truth that you are a light, a sunflower, and a bloomer. Sending you so much light and love again, beaming it your way. And in time, and as always, stay bright, brave, and balanced.